So hello everyone, welcome to today's fit. We've got long-time friend of Precision Golf, Todd Adcock here. He's known Kate for a very long time.
Yeah, since we're kids.
So, and we're going to run through, I'm going to go through irons and wedges first, and then in a separate video we're going to do the top end of the bag. So yeah, I mean, we had just been having a little bit of brief chat about what the MO is today and what you've been doing from a swing and an injury recovery and a point of view. So I guess if we go back over that a little bit just to kind of set the scene.
Yep. So for me, I've got a persistent wrist injury that comes back every now and again. Started in 2010. It was a ligament issue. Now it's become a little bit more nerve issue. And so for me, I've always played quite a heavy setup. Yeah. I think when we worked together before, I've really been very sensitive to swing weight. And I think to a degree that can be where I'd almost need to have the weight of the club, collect it and use it. Yeah. Now myself, kind of, my swing's progressed, I'm trying to up my speeds a little bit and trying to swing a bit more dynamically. And I just find the extra weight at the moment being a little bit more cumbersome, and it's kind of holding me back a little bit in technique. Yeah. So I think a lot of people tend to think that, I don't know, it's the archer, not the sort of the bow or anything like that. And actually, there's like you always say, there's a big part to play in the club and the weight of the club that you're swinging. So it's just looking at now, kind of what's the best fit for me to do what I want to do with my swing moving forwards. Yeah.
And so you've done a lot of, you've done speed work and really got some extra kind of snap and acceleration in the swing. And you're saying with these, the tendency's been to feel like you're having to kind of come back off the shot to force the club through, almost sort of to dump it through a little bit. Yeah. So your kind of centre of gravity from your posture's shifting to have to get the club into impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I get to a really good loaded position by kind of halfway down in the downswing, but then through, I guess, the inertia and the weight of the club, as I'm starting to release it, it's kind of pulling me away from the target, and then I'm really having to try and fight it back in. So that way tends to lead to, from what would look like being quite a, if you tell me, sort of late release at this point, I'd end up just dumping it, flipping the head past me. Bad shots would be shallow angle of attack, club gets past me, gets a bit shut, so the kind of high left shot would be kind of the bad one. For me, when I've done some training with an old driver that was an old play driver, lighter head, lighter shaft, lighter total weight, I feel like I can, from here, keep the hands moving forward, kick the club and get the hands in front of me where I want to get it to, so I can then manage angle of attack and face control much better. That's just something I've been kind of playing around with. Yeah. And through watching, like say, the great content that you guys put out on YouTube. I saw a video yourself did. That again, it just, those little things just kind of spark little bits in the brain and kind of make you think, okay, well, that could be a reason why sometimes I'm creating the issues I'm having.
And when you're saying a moment ago as well, how where the faster you accelerate, the quicker you accelerate. Actually, historically, heavy hitter, strong swing. We've always got heavy weight to deal, you flex to deal with it. But actually, if you're rapidly accelerating, heavy just gets left behind because the club's got to come with you. Yeah. So ironically, seeing a lot of the guys on tour, you look at Rory and Dustin, well, he's not on tour now, he's on live, but it's the guys who are the heavy hitters that play heavy. Someone like Rory accelerates quick and he's playing a 66, 67 gram shaft, where they always used to be 75, 80 grams. Yeah. So that's something we're seeing change for the top players as well as recreational players as well. So,
yeah, and I think it's as the golf swing, as speeds progress, like I say, if you're going to spin it faster, there's more of that kind of sort of centrifugal force pulling the club away from you, and it's a timing thing a lot of the time. And I think that as my swing's progressed, I've used the same shaft, well, probably since 2007 or 8. It's always kind of been in there, but it's only been the last, probably post-COVID really, the last few years, because when I played my best back in 2008, 9, 10, I guess, I was one of the longer hitters, and that was with the driver that I've been practicing with, which is slightly lighter, which makes sense. But now, as I've kind of gone to add speed, the shaft that I had in my irons back then isn't quite performing as I'd like it to. And funny enough, it was the speed thing came about after lockdown because I kind of came out of sitting around for 6 months and not doing too much, and then remembering what my numbers were from kind of 10 years ago. Yeah. And being like 10 miles an hour shorter, going, well, actually, I'm still sort of just mid-late 30s, still fairly fit, still fairly strong. Where have I lost 10 miles an hour from?
Youngster.
So it became a little bit of a kind of saying, okay, well, there's been the stable door's been left open here a little bit. We need to try and rein it in.
Right, perfect.
Cool.
So we'll start off irons-wise. We'll grab anything you like and loosen up.
So warm-up-wise, so just go through like normal warm-up routine before we build up.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll just pop that. God, we've got your life in there.
Oh, no, his coaching bag. It's kitchen sinks in there. It's like Mary Poppins handbag, that is.
So if I grab anything you like.
I'll
If it's
just do-
short wisers off the front
Yeah,
mat, and then
I'll
as you
literally
move up,
a couple of wedges to warm my wrist
I'll
up, a
reference
few
a couple of
9 irons,
bits.
and then I'll be good to go. And ball wise, I normally use TP5X.
5X, no problem. I'll make sure they're all marked up. So anything to have a loosen up with.
Yeah.
Grab
just
any
pop it
ball
down
at
here,
all. I'll
fine.
make sure these are all dotted up. And so general swing principles, obviously, driver, there's a speed element and distance element, but in terms of the principles of what you're doing with the swing, track across from driver into irons, I think you were saying about from a swing kind of control point of view, what you've done with the driver, again, we were saying this just before we came on video, was that's allowed you to control the face more from a leverage point of view.
Yeah, definitely. And the driver is something that I've kind of worked on a lot, and I've kind of got myself down to a really tight window, even when I'm doing speed training stuff and really trying to swing for the fences.
Yeah.
My path, angle of attack, and certain numbers that I try and keep just in the back of my mind don't really get too far off.
Yeah.
Even when I try and push speeds, delivery feels fairly similar.
Yeah.
Irons wise, and this again comes part to why I want to potentially change the weighting of the club to take a bit of pressure off my wrist, is that my old habit would be with the irons I'd lose it left.
Yeah.
So my head goes, okay, move the path further left and try and hold the face to keep it right. I then get steeper. So then what I have to do from there to get the club down to the ball is I have to dump the club down late, which tends to flip and roll it left. So my little pull cut turns into a pull hook, and that kind of gets a little bit dangerous at times. So definitely trying to blend my iron pattern more towards where the driver is, more of kind of like a push-draw tendency, which sees the same shape on the golf course. So I see the same shape with an iron as I do with the driver for consistency. But again, to be able to do that, I've got to be able to get the club to here rather than it always wanting to tail along behind me.
In terms of where this, because this is looking down the channel just on the edge of the mat, it'll see it going left as you loosen up, but that's just the line the TrackMan's aimed at for the when we move back to hit shots. And for those tuning in, Todd's been elite golfer for a long time, English Am champion.
Yeah, sort of a few years ago now. When was that? 2008. That was. So yeah. So
At least it's this millennia.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got two in front of it. That's the main thing.
And I think there was one particular tee shot at Woodhall Spa off the first.
That was that old gamer there, the old one with the Velcro on the front. Yeah. So that was the final against Chris Paisley. So I think I was one up at the. It was a 36-hole final, one up through 18. We kind of got rushed to get ourselves back out on the golf course. We got caught in some rain in the morning, so we were kind of pushed to start again. So jumped on the first tee. It was always like a little push draw, 2-iron down the first. A little bit 9th round of the week, a little bit stiff, kind of rushing my lunch. That ended up being blocked just out of bounds. So went back to the tee, a little bit of anger to get out, whatever it might be. So driver came out and smacked it on the front of the green, and then nearly half a hole.
How many yards away was that?
364, I think it is, 365, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the rage can help speed. It's always kind of a part of it.
Doesn't normally help direction as well.
Doesn't help the score quite so much sometimes. That's the problem. The left one, I feel of it.
That was the first one. Like we could take that one, that was that kind of the pop-up one. Take that off. Everything is 230, 240, 3. We had one get out there that far, everything else is 220. At least 10 yards back.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as we go through and look at the different options, and as you're saying about kind of where you've watched other videos and kind of the well, yeah, videos, coverage, and we're relating in kind of what you feel in the swing to some of the things we discussed.
Yeah.
I'll try and feed in as much of what we're changing. It'll be just kind of to track through the different weights and how that affects your impact
Yeah,
positions
definitely.
and angle of attacks. And I think particularly to face control, there's a really
That's
big
for
issue.
me
of that.
mainly because I practice a lot with the flight scope that I use for coaching as well. Path doesn't really change very much, and if anything, gets too neutral at times, where I
Right,
can tend to
yeah.
sometimes see a two-way miss because the face may change around. But
Yeah.
path's normally 0, 1, 2 degrees, but face is the one that can jump
Yeah.
around a bit.
225.
Stretch back on one.
Yeah, I think what'll be interesting when we look at the wood side of things, we'll touch a little bit on what you work on when you're developing your speed as well.
Yeah.
But when you're swinging the irons, kind of roughly, where are you sort of percentage-wise in terms of effort with the irons as a kind of a stock swing?
That would be, well, those ones there warming up, that'd probably be 70%. More feeling about kind of control and dialing it in. Because I always feel like I'm trying to manage where the face is late on,
Right, yeah.
rather than feeling like I can really, okay, that's ready to go, let it all go, let the speed come out past the ball.
Yeah.
I'm always feeling it here somewhere going, come on,
Management.
Trying to-
Yeah. Zorro, as we call
let's
it.
see, yeah, steer it a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely moved across the face.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's what you're seeing across the sort of warm-up shots, but we can see here, path, say, very neutral, kind of 0.0 to 0.5 into out, basically. But yeah, for a player of your ability, as you say, there's not a definite trend in terms of face to path.
And that's where I'm I think part of it I need to push my path and almost sort of visualise seeing it one way more. I think I kind of got myself a little bit too neutral, where any little move in the face is going to cause either a draw or a fade. So then all of a sudden my dispersion gets a bit too great because I'm seeing two different shapes. But yeah, and the tendency would be for me is like anything from there, everything will get a bit shallow, release a bit early, and then from there, just the more speed I'm getting, the higher I'm hitting it.
Yeah. So I can say with these, I mean, 9 iron you got there, say 2.5 down, which isn't. I mean, it's down, but it isn't a lot. We're looking more like kind of 5,
You can get a little
6.
bit picky.
And
that's where when I've been
26 launch, so pretty high launch.
Yeah. When I've been mucking around with a lighter iron, that's the one that I see 5 downs, 6 downs, much more consistently. I put this in my hand, I'm straight back up to 2s and 3s. And again, the more that I'm kind of down, it helps me just kind of manage the face, just to be that little bit more open, keep it under control. Because I think as a player, I've always liked to feel almost like open close on the door. I like to feel the face open rather than the modern trend of getting square early and then turn and burn around the corner.
Yeah.
I like to feel like I've got everything open and I can just slam the door shut as I release it a bit more.
Yeah.
So I've always played my best golf from a block.
Okay.
So if I'm on the range and I'm ripping it but I'm blocking it over there, I'm in the right slot because I know I can just freely go at that one and I'm going to turn it back to square rather than get it closed and then just try and hang on to it.
Yeah. No, as and when
Give it a
you're ready
change.
to move on up, yeah. Up to you, totally up to you.
Yeah, good to go.
6 there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll switch them over to the TP5s as well, the X's. Okay, put those down there. Okay.
Do you want the dot on the top or towards the screen?
I mean, iron-wise, anywhere not on the contact point is
Yeah.
good because there's so many more revs. When you get to driver, just on top. But, yeah.
Rely on when anything else is going on, just get that out to be done.
Yeah, it's pretty high, isn't it?
High.
It's not wildly spinny,
Yeah.
considering where the launch, where for your speed, where the launch is. It's still got a 5 on the front of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, I mean, height-wise, where are we height-wise? That's
It's like 120.
that was 140. That one.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, which is a lot. I mean, at your
Yeah.
speed, it's always going to be higher than where we'd fit a lot of amateurs into. So a lot of people talk about 90 feet. It's always going to be higher for you with your speed. It's closer to it, but yeah. I think so much of this is going to be getting the club to a point where what you feel has happened basically is what happens out there,
Yeah.
rather than having a swing where, especially if you're having to kind of fetch and salvage, or just so fetch and kind of salvage it and flip it. There's so much that volatility of that
Yeah.
fetch through.
And that's what I
Then
feel
can
is
mean
the,
you kind of get under and hold
that.
it, or you get over and shut it, and a swing that felt one way can go the other, and
Yeah.
then you stand there going, well, I don't trust anything now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, knowing that, I guess to a degree as well, is where launch monitors are great because you kind of look at what is a variable and what is a constant and go, okay, well, if that's fairly constant, that's the area I need to work on,
Yeah.
and then how do you kind of work on that? Seen that one?
Okay. Yeah, if we just do 2 more, would be great, just to get a pattern.
Yep.
So that probably shows everything about that. So, yeah, you can get a couple of nice that really look like they do the job
Okay.
in a nice way, and then you throw one in that
Cool.
just doesn't quite.
So, I mean, on face value, looking and go, well, there's not that much variation there, but that's because you're a very good golfer who can make things work
Make things
and know
work.
you've done enough practice to build in patterns to mitigate certain things going on. So, let's pull out some of the, just go into some of the numbers there. So, yeah, this is a path line. 0.0 on 3 of them and half a degree into out on the other 2. So very, very repeating. It's interesting where I think if your natural pattern is that little bit, and I know I always see it right to left. If I don't mind hitting a fade, but my eye doesn't want to see it. And if you're doing that with the driver and being able to control the club face and control a start right and then bring it back, if it's starting on line or starting just right and then dropping right,
Yeah.
then we start to try to see what we want to see from a flight, and the hands start to manipulate around. And I think what you've described about that element of having to kind of work it a little bit as you build the speed, the club having to kind of play catch up a little bit, that to me is a bit that ties into angle of attack being on the shallower side.
Yep.
And therefore launch being high. You can definitely see as you're coming into the ball, we don't get too close to as you're coming into the ball, there's that little bit of having to do that. And the moment, particularly with an iron, there isn't the width of arc, and sometimes with the drive you can see as everything extends and kind of kicks, you can see a little bit of that kind of, I don't use the phrase jump, but extension out of it. With an iron, we don't really want to see that as much. So if we're seeing that with an iron, then, as you said earlier, you're having to then work the club in. Once it gets behind you, you've got to go that way to make the club go that way, and out you come of it. And I think that's where there's the change in depth, the inability to get that natural shaft lean and natural low point in front of the ball, which then leads to that higher launch and that little bit of feeling like you've got to manage the club face rather than just turn onto it and collect it and keep it synced up. So there's nothing you look at and go, okay, that's a scary set of numbers, but it definitely, for where we'd want to see attack angle, where your speed would want to see that launch angle because of the speed you got. If we don't get that launch angle down, it's just
Yeah, and that's the thing for me, because
monumentally
those
high.
ones there, that's kind of like warm up, gentle, sort of smooth stock ones. So if I was ever to try and put any more through it,
Yeah, spin goes up.
I'm
yeah.
even shallower, I'm even earlier with it, I'm even higher with it, and it starts to go off. So I'm obviously you're not going to swing your irons super fast, but I do find the volatility almost in everything lining up, and there's been a lot of potential twist in the face,
Yeah.
rather than being able to, like I say, turn, have everything later. There's still a bit of angle left as the ball's being struck that I can then use later on.
Yeah.
Everything's already gone by the time I get to impact, and then I'm just kind of hanging on and trying to keep it looking in direction.
So good news is what you're feeling in the swing and what the shot pattern is ties into setup, and I think in case we'll get that weight moving down and see how much we can mitigate that off for you. So it's always nice when it
marries up.
What the player feels and what the club's doing and what the shot pattern's doing marries up. So I'll get equivalent club head so we can keep that side constant.
Yep.
And we'll work on getting that shaft work down. So shafts in the current clubs, I'll pull
KBS Tour X130s.
130s, yeah. So they're not a tip heavy shaft. They are still they're a shaft that Adam Scott's used, goodness knows how long, Ernie Els, those kind of guys. So there's plenty of stability there, but as you alluded to earlier, there's a lot of dead weight there. So they're up there in the same kind of realms as your dynamic golds, you've got 130 gram margins. So that's just, and so the quicker you start to accelerate, the more chance there is to leave that behind. So certainly, it's not going to be difficult to find something a little bit lighter. So I'll just go and grab some components to test out. I'm going to get a couple of components here so I can manage head weight, because the last thing we want is it getting bottom end heavy. So if we started, let's just take, I'm going to start just taking 10 grams or so out. Same family of shafts.
Yep.
So I'm going to see from a weighting point of view whether I can make the weight work. I want to use a head I can control the balance on. So you're using Callaway blades, it's going to be a blade head. So I'm going to start with the Apex.
I've got one more set of blades probably left in me before I go to a little bit more perimeter weighting, I think.
I'm going to start shaft-wise with the Tour V120. So still an X flexed, a very structured, very stable shaft. But we can just keep the balance profile pretty similar, but just get the dead weight working lighter. So loft light, that will get the loft identical. Good, that's spot on. Make sure it doesn't feel wildly different. Okay, so lengthwise, because the test shaft's got a 37.5, 38, that's 37 3/4. So just go on. I don't want to go longer with that. So just go on a hair less long, just because of the either side we've got on the test lengths.
You can feel the difference straight away in that.
And it's really kind of, so functionally what changes when we get the raw weight, the total weight down the shaft, is the biggest change in force and swing is as you start there. So if it gets heavy, as you fire the club, I always use the term before, it's like chaining it to the wall. The club doesn't come with you, so body fires, and then you've got to play catch up. So if we can get the weight down, it comes with you as you start down. So that should allow that, like you were talking about with the driver earlier, being able to get that natural shaft lean and get the handle working ahead of the ball to cover it a little bit.
And it's even at the top of the swing. I mean, I've found it in the other drivers that I've used, I can kind of hold the club and keep the width like I want to do and take a little bit of like load off the wrist straight away, whereas as it's getting a little bit heavier, it just wants to collapse a little bit more. That was toey.
think what's going to be different is as we go a little lighter is whether we need to put the weight in a slightly different position as we drop total weight out. Do we need to give you a bit more in the bottom end, or actually keep it that even weight profile that the KBS Tour Series has?
Try and strike one this time.
Okay. I can certainly see it starting to get a little more out in front. It's not quite tracking right yet, but so the Tour V of ending tends to play slightly lighter in the tip than the Tour.
Yep.
I'm going to take the weight a little bit further. I want to find too light, and then we can bring it back up. So kind of find, we know what the top end parameter is. Let's find the bottom end, and then we can find that sort of middle ground and get the control back. So let's go. A couple of grams less. So CT115 in the X, just like 117 grams. So busy time coaching at the moment?
Yeah, they're pretty good coming out of the winter now. So
well,
seems to be
0 this morning when I drove in.
February was kind of like, we had a few days where we kind of, you come out of coaching in the winter and you get that few days where you're like, it's 12, 13 degrees, it's sunny. We're out of it. We're on the home run. Next day I turned up, it was freezing, fog, 0 degrees, and you couldn't see past 100 yards. So that put me back in my box.
Joy. Yeah. It's been a kind of funky year.
Yeah.
So I think
been good for golf February-wise, like I say, just keeps people golfing when it's been a bit cold and a bit drier. Kept golf courses open.
I certainly had periods where my courses, the amount of emails going, weather update or course condition update shut.
Especially
January,
if you're working all week and your game of golf's on Saturday morning, that's the one opportunity you got to play, and then you wake up Saturday morning, see the email at 7 o'clock, 6:30, it's closed again. You get a few, you understand it, but it can be frustrating.
Time it so you just pull the covers back over your head.
Yeah.
Okay. So interesting from the point of view of that looked like it squared through a little bit better.
That felt like it was here more. It was moving. It's this space from here to here. It felt like it carried on moving through here rather than it got good to there and then I just couldn't keep it going.
Yeah. Well, and first swing's always an interesting one because you haven't had a chance to learn it. That's just a bit of an instinctive move. Whereas with the others, they're just tending just to hang that way as in right, just a little bit. So
I think it's where the kind of what you sort of perceive what should happen, should we say, and what does happen get different.
Yeah.
Because normally it's okay, well, you're struggling to have a bit more weight to it, leave the club behind you a little bit more. Whereas actually for me, when it's lighter, I feel like I can get everything out in front better.
Yeah.
In that one.
Okay, so I think raw weights that's looking a lot better. It's not a counterbalance shaft, but it's whether I'm going to give you a little bit more on the bottom half, so we can then use that to time the head to release.
I think from
to
a feel
that
wise,
kind of bottom end coming.
I almost kind of like the feeling, or want the feel that the handle's lighter, and I've got all the weight down in the head to clump into it late, rather than it's almost. I feel it with the driver. It's almost like there's too much weight in the shaft and high up that I just can't quite get the hands where I want them to, and everything's kind of moving together rather than a late whip, if you like.
You can certainly do that. So it's not extreme, but going to give you a decent bit more feel on the bottom end. So you're going to move to the nip on the Modus, the 120 and an X, if I can see them here. That's the longer one. That's the 125. But thank you. Might be in there. I'll use this to start with. I might need to check in the workshop. This is the slightly longer of the two, but I'll might need to check in the workshop to see if it's not just had a bit of a re-gluing or something like that. So this one from a structure point of view is much more that kind of a little bit, it's still in that kind of 117, 118
Yep.
gram area, but balance, stability design down the bottom, just as Stenson's used.
What's the swing weight on that at the moment?
Well, this
compared
one,
to mine?
so at the same length would be just a little bit heavier.
Okay.
So with this one, just take it down
Yeah,
take it
smidge.
down a centimetre or so.
So it's almost like lighter total, but sort of similar or slightly heavier swing weight.
Slightly heavier swing weight, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cleaner straight away.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch that, but it certainly felt like that one. The one before was light and I could move my hands.
Yeah.
I couldn't feel the head. That one I could move my hands and I felt a little bit of kick in the head.
Yeah, you could certainly see that, and a little bit that I'm looking for is that drop in where that just falls into plane, and just stays there a little longer, so it lets you develop the speed a little bit more, use the weight to develop the speed, but as you say, the key thing is get it in the right bit of the club rather than just mass.
Definitely. That felt better.
Okay, so that one, yeah, so interesting enough, so to me, I was wondering whether it's probably swinging just a hair heavy just because of that current setup, easy to mitigate. And it looked a little bit right, but it's square face right rather than open face right. So it's path that's done it rather than the face, which then makes it much more controllable because you're not then having to manage an open blade. So as you say, you can use the weight, now with lighter in total weight, you can use the bottom end weight to time the face squaring through rather than have to...
That's the feeling. The feeling is I can get the hands to here,
Yeah,
so that can then be freely allowed to kick,
yeah,
rather than I can only get the hands to here, and then I'm always trying to...
yeah, because it's not going to start left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one for me, is getting rid of that left starter.
Yeah, interesting. Ball speeds up, more efficient. So slightly, again, I think this is where we mitigate the head weight a little bit. But what's interesting is flight is stronger.
Yeah.
So just looking at those, I'll go onto that. I'll go onto averages screen here. So with each of those relative to your current ones, the launch angle's down. Launch angle's down. It's half a degree or so. Half 3/4 of a degree, and spin down a little bit. But interesting, angle of attack hasn't really changed yet. So what it is letting you get into is a stronger, you're starting to create naturally a little bit of shaft lean without hitting
Without
down
just
a bit more,
driving
so a
to the
stronger
ground.
impact position.
Yeah.
So just a
Try
little
and
bit
hit a
stronger
couple where I
flight.
feel like-
Okay. I'll come back to that. I'll make another little. I'll soften that off a fraction, but certainly. Those
Certainly
will
felt
feel
more the weight in the head there kicking down at the ball better, which I don't quite feel in mine. I feel more the weight's spread across the length of it.
very much so. Yeah, very much so. You've got 10% more shaft weight in that, but very, very even through. And so this one, it's because with the Modus they've reinforced the tip, so the design is very, very tip stable for dispersion. But then if you made the butt end stiff, you'd get nothing from it. So a little bit of a softer butt section to get a little bit of load, but that has the effect of putting the balance point in the bottom end. So you think of someone like Stenson, when he was winning both sides of the Atlantic, was using that shaft. He's got a very, very strong kind of handle-led impact position. He really gets on top and covers it. And so having that balance down the bottom to make it harder for him to kind of cast and flip at it, that's where that really tied in well for him. So let's think if I want a similar balance point, maybe rein it back a fraction. Where am I going to go with that? Yeah, interesting. Because we want the structural rigidity in it. I just don't want to go more exaggerated.
Too much choice, that's the problem.
Well, there's a lot of choice, but it's getting the relevant ones.
Yeah.
There's not, within that kind of dead weight category, there aren't that many that will also keep the sort of stability and natural weight positioning within them. I'm going to, that raw weight. There were a couple of others, go back a few years, there were a couple of others in that kind of weight category. I'm going to... Yes. That might feel, we'll see, this might feel a little bit softer in the middle, but so just pushing the base weight up a couple of grams. So it's a slightly different profile. This is more seeing if we move the weight. This is the nip on the 1150 in an X. So just to get that dead weight pushing up a little bit and keep that bit of feel in the bottom half of the shaft. Technically, in theory, it's not quite as tip stiff, but it's more to see if we push the weight back up a little bit.
Yep.
What does that do to that timing? Does it feel like you're having to play catch up again with it? Just getting the swing weight to the right level as well. A little bit of lead take. Okay.
Lovely.
Great, thanks.
Tidy that.
The one hand finish is always a bit of a sign that it hasn't synced up quite. I'll watch one more, but then, well, interesting. I mean, actually, we don't need to. Launch angle straight up again.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Definitely felt that was quite toey, and it felt it.
yeah, and again, what we could see going back up a little bit, again, is that slight separation between where you get to and then the club comes catapulting through afterwards. So it's body, club, rather than everything we're coming through in one go. So hence, you know, back up that half a degree in launch angle, back up the 500 revs in spin, and hence that kind of one-handed finish because everything's out of sync.
Then that's gone, I'm hanging on to it.
Yeah.
Certainly of the ones we tried, the previous one to that was the one that felt like that lighter handle, but still some weight to hit the golf ball with.
Yep. Go into one of these now. Actually going to go into the Project X, the IO. Again, similar kind of flex, it's sort of X flex, 6.5 flex, but again, balance down the tip. And this is kind of a next generation of the old PXI.
Okay.
In principle, they probably wouldn't say that, but actually in terms of how it fits into the kind of the shafts on the wall, it's definitely similar kind of carryover. So it feels a little bit tighter than the PXI used to. Okay, so definitely syncs up a little bit better than that last one.
Yep.
Although back a little left. So those that want to know what the IO stands for, it is individually optimized.
Okay.
Is the IO. So as they go from 5.5 to 6.0 to 6.5, they stiffen the profile. Not just the flex go stiffer, but the actual the flight's designed to come down with each shaft.
Yep.
That's the design anyway. Yeah, again, it's where the weight is in the shaft is a little bit better, but that's still up a little higher in terms of launch. That's still, to me, even just going back into that modus, that's still like it's just that little bit of a rise out of it, and then you get that underneath, really so dynamically a little bit more loft because the head's not changing. It's exactly the same loft on the head. It's just where you're able to get the handle to dynamically take loft off it. So back into the modus. So because that was noticeably a little different when we went into it the first time round. So you know, where that launch angle spin was, you know, the spin on the IO is pretty good. Actually, that's taken the spin down, but it's noticeably a higher launch, and the launch angle, the shaft isn't going to bend enough to change the launch angle by a degree and a bit. So it can only be how
delivering
that relationship between where handle and head comes through. Yeah.
Bring that one a bit.
Got a little higher with that one.
Felt as though it wasn't a very good swing with a different strike, but it felt safer through here rather than wanting to get that way on me.
Interesting, that launched a little higher, that one. Angle of attack, slightly better though. It's interesting, those last couple have been back a little high. I'm just going to see, I'm going to have a quick check in the workshop because I want to just get that length back down a fraction.
Yep.
Just so we're not, I say fighting it, but we're not having that in the equation.
Okay. One more.
A combination of feeling and working on same time, if you've got the wrong clubs in your hand and try to make the swing work. It's one of those, it's a chicken egg, which one comes first?
Yes, the steel fibre would be slightly more expensive.
And one more, and then give that one a swing.
Right. Wasn't where it should have been. Didn't jump out of me. That's the problem. This is the same length as the other ones in that same motor shaft. That was the one I was looking for earlier, but couldn't find because it was facing the wrong way and in the wrong bit.
I'm like that at home. If it's not in the front of the cupboard, I can't see it.
No.
It's not there.
Okay, yeah. That's more like it.
That's it. What was the difference of this one?
Sorry?
What was the difference of this one?
Oh, just the length of it.
Okay, yeah.
So where I just wanted to test that shaft earlier because
Yep.
I couldn't find that. I assumed it was being repaired, but actually it was just in a different bit of the rack. So swing weight's still a little heavier than your current ones because of the balance point.
Okay.
But we're not going to be comparing with a longer shaft here. So. Because my suspicion is with having swung the others in and going back to that other one, is that where it was a little bit longer and therefore a bit heavier swing weight, that was just hanging. Where you're now out of that habit of fetching the heavier weight,
Yeah.
that just started to lag it a little bit and leave it slightly open.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, going back to that length, that's 0.0 on face to pass.
Yep.
So there's just less club to have to.
Give that a go.
bring
And this
through.
compared to, because mine are quarter inch or half inch?
They're
longer?
slightly long, quarter inch longer than that.
Yeah.
Now it's manageable to get to that length and keep the swing weight in line with this. It's just that keeping the head as close as possible.
Yeah.
There's no reason. Length is a bit of not a barrier, a kind of a band you can fit within, and it's really looking at. There are kind of half inch or so you can fit within based on someone. You know, if you've got bad back and you can't get down to the ball,
Yeah.
you fit the top end of it. If you've got someone who's really struggles on ball striking, you'd fit the bottom end of it. You might kind of you don't have to go send a half inch progression each club. You can progress it so you can keep the length of the bottom end and taper off the top end. So it's kind of putting everything to the melting pot. I mean, there'd be no reason to go longer than your current ones.
No, definitely not.
If the shorter length that quarter inch felt a little bit more comfortable, if it helped square it up a little bit more, then you can find an argument for that, as long as you don't go overly short the bottom end of the wedges.
I mean, the lengthwise, I'm quite happy kind of where it was. And definitely, if I'm going to trend any direction, it was probably those ones that would feel the face being left a little bit more open rather than shutting itself down to try and sort of protect against the left one that would be the notorious bad one.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's slightly. I'm going to just to look at the swing weight side. I'm going to put another head on that and just get the swing weight down a fraction.
Yep.
Because I like where the general sequencing is. I just wonder if we can get the head weight down a fraction, because it's at 37.5, it's a D4. If we can get it down more D3, 3 and a bit, then does that just help that club face come through a little bit more naturally? A little bit. So I'll just use a different head to do that. So I'm going to switch. Oh, that one's actually quite light. That was a little lighter than I thought. I'm just going to switch over to the Titleist MB, which is the same shape, but just lets me control the weight a little bit more. 620 MB. Good, it is where I wanted it to be. Okay, I'll make sure loft's in the same place. Okay, good, don't have to move that. So that's actually a swing weight point lighter, so that's down, that's at D3. So that's something we can kind of build that back up a little bit again, but at least that way we can control it rather than having to firefight it. Okay, yeah, so that we can see that's gone a little too far, because that really kind of roped it around. But interestingly there, I mean, okay, face is shut down a bit, but the moment we can take out any of that fetch, it should then naturally let you, because we take out that collect, kind of bring that loft down.
Having the new club built to kind of where I want to push my swing to, and something that facilitates it more. It's kind of like, say, as I think as humans or certainly golfers, but you start to adapt to it 4 or 5 swings later. And it's just knowing that by the end of the day, I've got something that is actually going to help me get to where I want to get to, whether or not it's kind of today or not. But certainly even with these, taking that, what was it, 10 grams?
12 grams,
out,
yeah, 12, 13
from that, feels very different.
Yeah, it's not, if you think of it, 12 grams in the hand isn't very much, but if you take it as 10% of the shaft weight,
and move it
which
100 miles an hour, it gets a bit heavy.
Got from 0 to 100, that's a lot of momentum to not have to find. Definitely better going back a little heavier. You can hear it in the contact.
Yeah, it feels like there's some weight to throw down at the ball.
This is the Titleist head. So using that one just to control the weighting on it.
Yep.
Okay, let's see one more there. I think you're right in saying it's a case of saying rather than being good at managing something, but it being a buffer to actually taking your swing where you want it to go. It is one of these, the club really can help you get it to kind of progress with a swing, with swing work, and sometimes it can be the bit that makes it impossible to do it. So as a coach, you can be banging your head against a brick wall trying to get someone to, playing their old dynamic old R300s or S300s, going, right, we'd like you to get the shaft more out in front of it, and go, well, okay, well, there aren't as many tour players using that way the shafts are used to. Yeah. And if you're wondering, if you're some kind of 50-year-old 15 handicapper trying to shift a club that's heavier than you're trying to move, it's a massive barrier. Yeah.
And it's one of those things that there's a lot of different reasons for it. One for technique, but also for like injury prevention, longevity, all those sort of things. This makes it easier.
But I think swing technique progressions, we've seen a massive acceleration in the amount of players going lighter, because actually functionally you're now moving a little more rotational, working on a little bit more speed. It's not that lateral move that requires the weight to drop it into plane. It's actually that lighter weight helps someone rotate and collect it. Yeah. So technique improvements have really seen that accelerate how many people are going lighter. Yeah, starting to see, for me, watching you swing a little bit more of that extension, that kind of long right side through the back of the ball.
Feels a bit more together through the ball. Yeah. Rather than a little bit of that kind of, I don't know, little fairground chairs on the chains kind of kicking motion that you try and stall a bit.
I'm going to push that up a little bit. I'm just going to test that. Let's push that weight up a little bit more. So as I creep it up again, get it to the point where we just creep a fraction heavy, then we bring it back down.
Just dumped it in the ground.
And I think some of it at this point, it's a case also it'll start to feel a little less simple. And so that way it goes out, you're going to start to feel that you've got to do something different to deliver it. So as we shift through as we do with shaft weights, but as we shift through the swing weight side of things, the simpler it feels, the better it is.
Yeah.
So if it allows you just to unwind and just not think about it, then we're in a good place.
Yep. That felt a little bit more like it wanted to pull down into the ground.
Fetch, just drag it over a little. Okay, let me take that
Lefty.
back off a little. Let's show you which one does that bit. There we go. So literally looking at, in terms of the amount of weight I've just taken off there, half a gram.
Okay.
So 0.2 of a swing weight point, 0.2, 0.3. Yeah, and take that off immediately. That's back a little bit more connected. So angle of attack slightly shallower there.
Yep.
And I know, yes, face to path is closed a little bit, but that to me is more a function of looking at how clean that looked. That's more a function of angle of attack than it flipping.
Yeah.
So, and by that I mean just to display. If you get a little shallower, the club's already kind of more likely to pass you. A little more on top of it. It's squaring at that impact point rather than closing down. So that's where angle of attack at 0.2 there. Todd's been at 2, 2.5. Some of these. So the more you catch it a little earlier in the swing, the face hasn't had a chance to go beyond square. So. Yeah, because there's absolutely no flipper in that, and then so degree and a half angle of attack, and then actually you get into something you said earlier, 1.2 into out, 1.2 face to path. So face to target's dead square, but it's the path that's shaped it, not the face rotation that shaped it.
Yeah.
And we're now also starting to see that launch angle coming back down again, but the spin staying very, very stable with it as well.
Let's try that.
That looks nice. Yeah, so now starting to get that stability of paths. One a bit from in to out, faces half degree closed, one a bit closed, so it's just starting a touch right, just dropping back a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you're then controlling just where the pitch of swing is in the path, rather than having to salvage and flip.
It's definitely, for me, it's like dialing in that face to path number, because then I've kind of got a good grasp of kind of where my path is, but it's the face that I lose control of.
Yeah.
So if the face to path can be much more controllable because the balance is better, like I said, I can bend it by moving the path rather than struggling with the face.
And then pathways using your big muscles to control it, more predictable, rather than your face's little hands, small muscles. Yes, that's to me, when we've gone back to this weight, those last few, look like you're just now standing and moving and collecting the ball, and we're seeing a distinct pattern of those last few, there, that one, they're down a narrow
I feel
channel.
like I can kind of...
They're all just drawing in a little bit.
Yeah. That felt like, because I kind of felt like I had more balance in the club through delivery, I could then try and feel a little bit more into out, try and catch it a little bit earlier and try and start it right. Yeah. There's a feel with that one. Let's try one
it also
more
has that look watching that you're just unwinding through it. There's a little bit more freedom and therefore a little bit more extension through the back of the ball as well.
In that one a bit.
Yeah, a little more.
Got to kick a little bit earlier.
Yeah, because certainly if we push it any heavier than that, that's when we see you starting to have to fetch that through.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, actually interesting thing there, a little more shot shape, but angle of attack is shallowed out a little bit.
Yeah, that felt more
A
like
little more
delivery
into out.
caused rather than
Yeah.
club caused.
What would be interesting is actually to see a couple of kind of non-stock swings, just to see if you're kind of playing a shot. Just make sure the club allows you to
Okay.
do that without having to kind of manipulate too much.
So if I was to try and sort of feel like I was kind of top end number rather than those sort of swings are
Either,
kind
yeah,
of
or whether you're,
very
if
much
you're
sort of
between clubs and
stock or
whether
middle.
you're, so rather than just a stock number, if there are particular shots that you'll go to as a, either between clubs, if there's a kind of a half a club less kind of swing, or whether there's a particular shot that you like to go to on the course as a control shot.
Okay. That was more like if I was to actually not go at one, but make a more committed move.
Yeah.
I probably felt those swings so far are all kind of 70%.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd like to kind of feel the freedom to be 80, 85.
Yeah. Yeah, the same pattern.
Numbers
apart,
not jump.
A little into out, face a little closed. So
Just dumped it a bit early.
little bit. I mean, it's one of those, it looks a lot of shape on there, but you're looking at you're putting 11 and a half yards, which is
But also for me,
actually
if it's doing the
across
same
a
shape,
200-yard shot
Yeah.
isn't a lot. Yeah.
if it's doing the same shape, I can cope with that.
Mm.
It's when I go for that, to make that swing, and then I then hit that one right.
Right. Yeah.
So that
yeah,
one
yeah.
there, I could feel like, okay, well, let's just try and make a slightly fuller swing. Let's just try and feel that little trap draw a bit more. If it's moving right to left.
Yeah, because face to target's still actually slightly open.
Yeah.
So it's not like the face is
That's
rocketed close and hit a snapper.
The bad one is that shape that starts 2 degrees left.
Yeah. Yeah. I like where that's sitting. It's whether, I think one of the questions here, and this is just sort of dialing in flight and things, would be, for where trajectory is right now, there's a strong argument just to nudge loft a little bit, but then there is also the element of saying, okay, well, if you get a little more on top and covered onto it, you're naturally going to bring, it's still only 1 degree down an angle of attack.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at being more like kind of three and a half, then that's going to bring that launch angle down. It'll maintain spin, but you're going to see a stronger launch angle.
Yeah.
So it would be for you, and for a lot of golfers, we're just, okay, that's your pattern, we'll just move the loft. For you, it's okay saying, okay, well, do you want us to move the loft a little bit, or would you want to say, okay, well, let me get a little more on top of it first, and then judge where ball flight is?
Yeah, I think my set, and I like the numbers and kind of the yards that I've got. I play the irons are 1 degree strong from standard.
Yep.
Which puts the pitching wedge in at 45. That gaps on wedges nicely.
Yep.
And then I go 4 iron into 2 iron, so it goes 4 irons at 22 degrees, 2 irons at 18.
Yeah.
And it gaps out quite nicely.
Yeah.
And then for me, like progression wise, like you're saying, it's more kind of saying, where are you going to, not where are you now?
Yeah. And what there's also always the I'll just do this, check the lie where this one's there's all okay, see if I can get my mouth to work. What there always is the function to do is to say, okay, well let's if we do the build work on them, gap them, we know where they are, we know where these ones are, we know where they are, and then say, okay, well, if as you go through and do that swing work and progress that in, do we need to adjust? They're easy to adjust. You can always have more fine tuning on where you get the flight to and distances to, and then whether we need to just make adjustments to fine tune that.
This is certainly the feel of this. Those sort of easier swings I was making earlier, those ones I've been making, feel much easier to make.
Yeah.
If it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's almost like, especially if I notice it more, if I've the wrist played up, I've had an injury, and then I'm coming back to golf from 4, 5, 6 weeks out, then all of a sudden I'm like, I need to get strong enough to swing these again.
Yeah.
Whereas this feels more like if I play a half shot or a little delicate shot, I know where the club head is and I know where it's going, rather than it going, come on, here we come.
Yeah. But I think that goes back to partly where modern technique is, and historically where it was, where you're probably just about old enough to have learned this. So it was drive the legs and then hit with the hands, because if you didn't use your weight to start the club down, they were all 130 grams plus.
Yeah.
So you had to fetch it to start with, shove the handle forward so you didn't fat it, and then square the face, which was a horribly volatile move. Whereas I think now we've got so many options in shafts to tie into someone's movement patterns and speed development, I'd say that rather than strength, and how you develop your speed, then actually that layoff period suddenly coming back is quicker, because you're not having to hulk up to get the thing moving again.
Yeah.
You can just put a slightly quieter move on, the club still comes with you. And it's just then, okay, there'll be there's a little bit of a build back in, but it's not that kind of mountain to climb to get back into.
And like you said, old school golf being very much right and left, rather than rotary and, like I say, how you're opposing forces to create speed. Everyone was very much like, load up to your right in the backswing, load up to your left in the follow through.
But functionally, because a club is an appropriate word for what we all used to, Dad's club's club down was still, the base weight was still 130 gram shaft. So it's just functional. It's one thing that what one had to do with the club weight fed the technique that was best at the time, because you just had to do it.
Yeah.
And I think now there's been so many advances in equipment and launch monitors, in biomechanics and understanding of functioning what creates a better movement. We can now get a functionally much better movement because all the kit allows us to do it.
Yeah.
So
and I can imagine as well for you, there's
just still a
so
hard
many more
game.
different options of how stiff that shaft plays, how light the shaft can be, rather than flex always went up with weight. There's a lot more categories to that now.
Yeah,
and again,
material
moving it
improvements,
around.
whether it's graphite or steel, the ability, different alloys, different heat treatments, different, you can strengthen different areas of the shaft as you can get lighter and stiffer. That's been across the board with graphite or steel. It's been a big change.
Yeah.
And actually, flex, we now know really it's more a feel thing. It's more how the player reacts to that stiffness. And between that and say the stiff flex would feel softer, but it's also 3 grams lighter, and that's just, you're then going to dump that. We saw that from the Oban shaft.
Yeah.
So it's functionally much more that, but also what feel we've got accustomed to is to sometimes particularly in the graphite shaft, where you can affect the torsional stiffness, the sort of zonal kind of butt tip stiffness more. You can get a shaft that feels nice to hit as well as moves well.
Yeah.
Whereas with steel, it's a little bit more, they're already rotating incredibly, the torque rating on steel is incredibly low, so that's never an issue. It's just, it'll feel better if it's delivering better.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, right.
No, and so actually that's the we've just stood in the tee for 5 minutes waiting for the group ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
I did that. You're looking at the lie, which is, I'll show this to Karen, which is dead square up the face. So the nice thing about that is it's a basically a ramrod straight shot, angle of attack a little more on top of it, launch angle, spin in a better window. We're testing lie, whether that's visible, but you can see they're dead square up the face there, visible. So you can see that white line there. So, and I say, having stood chin wagging for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's your kind of like similar tee, waiting for the group in front to finish, and then.
So that swing then hasn't relied on a batch of a few before to the hands to learn what they're doing.
It's
That's
not the
just
range
a
swing.
natural go and flow.
When you've got 20, 30 balls to warm up to it, it's what comes out on the golf course. Right.
Yeah, it's a really nice, stable, synced up motion where if I give you, what will be interesting to see now, if I give you that back, as you say, the shot direction is either the very straight one or a slight draw into there.
Yep.
It's that, and we've lost that one where the face gets open more than half a degree and starts to bleed out right. So it's only going to go right if the path goes there.
You can feel the weight of this straight away as you come kind of back into it.
Yeah. And we're very, anyone's heard me, the good phrases we all use, we are pretty sensitive creatures. Actually that force change with that much extra weight, it's a lot. The momentum gain is a lot. So a lot of players go, I don't know if I'll notice it. And it's just the physics of leverage and momentum and that centrifugal force. It's just more effort to swing.
And even swinging there, it feels like there's a bit of right, come on, and then it goes, and then you're always kind of waiting for it.
Yeah, and that
But-
ultimately is an exaggeration of what is actually happening.
Yeah.
You know, it's going back to the old drive, you had to, because you've got to get enough momentum to
Yeah.
get the thing changing direction. So.
Similar bounce and grind, just got 10 on it rather than 11.
Missed that one. That was a reaction as well. I could almost feel like that was back here somewhere.
I mean, to watch the swing again, there's as you say, there's just more going on.
Yeah.
And delivery line. You're a very good player. You've done a lot of swings, practicing a lot of technique. It's a great line through the ball, but that efficiency dropped right off.
Yeah, that wasn't where I wanted it to be. Better.
Yeah, and there is a bit more of that kind of load up to it. You can always see you build it up, and then and angle attacks back shell it out a little bit more. There isn't that straight to right to left shape. There's now that through it coming in a little bit late. So handle goes up a little bit as you come through.
Yeah.
Under the face goes, and it's just then starting to drop to the right, and you're then going to have to close the face down with your hands to get it back onto line.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just it's something, as you say, very elite level players will manage it and will make it work.
And if you're playing a lot and practicing a lot, you can kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah. And it's almost a. I'll give you this one back now. And that's almost a bad thing, actually. For your average player doesn't practice enough, and maybe doesn't have. You aren't hitting enough shots to change the patterns and to dial in a compensation as much. So actually, for a mid to high handicapper, you're not going to see the same issues of continuing a development and developing a pattern that actually that kind of longer term actually hurts you, because you've then got to undo so much to get out of those habits.
Yeah.
So sometimes that level of practice and zoning in a compensation takes a lot of getting out of once you've hit that many shots.
I think it's certainly what I see in the rounds of golf sometimes is that one we were talking about then is, say 2 or 3 swings in, I can get oomphed up enough and the revs up enough to kind of really make that work to a degree.
Yeah.
Speed-wise, if you like, or certainly efficiency. But then I can stand here and have a chat for 5 minutes and then hit the first one out with this, and it's all coming with me. It's where I want it to be.
It's interesting knowing that last one with your current one, very, very distance-wise, very efficient, but it brings in a little bit of a spread.
Yeah.
Then unfortunately you've got that long lasso one,
Yeah.
and then the shorter one just drops to the right.
It's a lot more
rather than
timing
being,
volatile. As a
giving up
feeling.
a couple of yards, but it being a tighter dispersion.
Oh, I nearly missed that.
Yeah, and that's a great example of where 2 or 3 swings with the heavier one,
Yeah.
and straight away the fetch
You're
comes back
moving
into
differently,
it, and
yeah.
it just chucked it straight into the ground. But actually, delivery pattern is neutral to the slight draw. It's just caught below
Just the difference
below
in the
ball,
weight.
went deep on it. Yeah, it's watching you move it. Your posture doesn't change as much,
No.
and straight away back into that same around the kind of 196 to 198,
bit bottomy, that one
199
again.
distance.
Let's try and move on one a little bit and see how it reacts.
Yeah, so 1.8 into out, 1 degree closed in the face. It's that same draw pattern rather than one that goes a little bit
It
right.
feels like it's here.
And then you draw it over. Yeah.
Rather than it's
Yeah.
doing that.
Exactly. Yeah, and
I'd
it's fine tuned. It's not like those are performing badly, but they're just not letting you take the swing on to where you want to get it to.
Yeah.
But that then on course just means a little bit more variation. You say not knowing, if you put the swing on that you want to, not knowing what it's going to do, there's a chance it could go either way. Whereas you put the swing on you want to with that, it's got that little bit of right to left.
The feeling definitely with this is that the head is where I want it to be, when I want it to be there, if you like.
Yeah.
It's not playing catch up as much. And it feels like, as the more I get used to it, I can sort of deliver the club the way I want to a bit better.
Yeah, you'll be able to. So the club's swinging you a little bit on the other one, whereas
Yeah.
you're swinging the club on that a little bit more. Strong contact. Yeah. Yeah, and that's club speeds up a little bit.
That was just when I tried to just
Sounded
turn a little
really,
bit more on it.
really solid contact. And so there's still a little bit of the angle attack that'll develop and that'll change the. And this is that comment about the kind of the loft. Actually, probably better to leave it where your current ones are.
Yeah.
And then let you do what you're doing with the swing, and then maybe say, okay, well, do we need to adjust them a little bit to either get flight back to where it was, or to mitigate to manage spin profiles, distances, because I think as old habits got out of and you dial that action in, we'll see that pattern
I think that'll
change just a
progress
little
more. I
bit.
think at the moment
Yeah.
it's kind of like I've kind of got sort of with those. I'm kind of going as far as I can with them, and now I kind of need to go to something. Right, this is a new journey with a new club. Now I feel like I can start to push on a bit more.
I think that ultimately is, summarising the iron change. It is a fine tune. The
Yeah.
head style, the loft, the lie. Again, you don't need any help with the faces giving kick and getting distance. That will just mean to you less consistency on shot distance. Less spin consistency. We're not looking to gain anything there. We're actually looking to make sure that it doesn't bomb beyond where you want it to. Keep a bit of spin. Again, the blade does that more than you move weight into the sole. It's going to take spin off.
Yeah.
We actually, for where we want to retain that bit of spin, it's more getting that launch angle down and keeping the spin than the other way. So head-wise, it's a single piece muscle back blade as your current ones are. Loft's the same, lie's the same. This is purely about shaft weight and weight position within the shaft, dropping dead weight, more weight in the bottom to allow you to get that handle out in front and control the face. And as you say, that's then facilitates the next stage in what you're doing swing-wise, rather than you develop more speed with that, then you're coming out of it even more and you lose face control.
Yeah.
So,
I'm having to throw myself at it with that one a lot more. This one moves a lot easier with me. It moves a lot easier. Thinking of it from a playing perspective, playing tournaments, like I said, I feel like I could stand around and chat and then go and hit a tee shot and still get a similar-ish sort of shape and move to that, rather than with this one I might have 2 or 3 swings, practice swings, to kind of say, come on, let's get revved up a little
find
bit,
a
get ready
sequence
to
that feels okay,
get
I'll
ready
hit
to do
one
this.
now.
Whereas before I kind of almost was a little bit slower and kind of went with the weight a bit more. Now I'm trying to push on and move past that. It's not quite coming with me.
Yeah. I think in terms of, so where we are with the swing weight side of it is, well, actually, if you played the same length as your current ones, you end up pretty much bang on the same swing weight of D4.
Yeah.
It's just that it'll move differently because of the shaft weight position moving. So actually, and this is where swing weight is a little bit fluid. It always needs interpreting. It doesn't mean the same thing from a feel point of view if the swing weight's the same. So I think it's a bit of a, because of your speed, you can argue both ways around in terms of, we're not looking for, I think it's sort of a posture and a comfort thing, more the bottom end of the iron set. There's every argument to say, well, lengthwise and posture-wise, it's good with those. If we're looking to keep that a little, if we're looking to actually stop getting a little bit steeper and dump it, then actually the argument is for the slightly longer length, because that keeps it a little bit more rotational, keeps chest up and allows you to turn onto it rather than getting over it and then it getting a little bit steeper. So from that point of view, I think we look to keep the length where it is. If you were looking to get the plane a little bit steeper, then you can maybe argue a little bit shorter, but there's no need to. I'd leave it where it is.
For me, I'm comfortable
I don't see
with
any reason to take
with
that
the
length
I mean,
down.
more today, I'm comfortable with kind of the length, the lofts of them. It's more just, it was more really the sort of conversation about shaft and changing the shaft weight, where the weight is, to allow me to kind of start to deliver it a bit better. But also, what I did see with this more was, as we used the shaft, I kind of liked the feel of it straight away, but was seeing the same sort of shot coming out.
Yeah.
And again, what we said about with the wrist problems, me looking to try and move my iron game more towards where my driver is, which is more of that kind of push-draw tendency.
Yeah.
This is starting to do that for me more consistently, rather than the one that could be a flip left and I hang on to it and go right, because I'm always battling it.
And actually, I think that's the interesting bit with the pattern on the path. If the path moves right more, it draws a bit more. If the path squares off, like that last one's half a degree out to in, it's basically dead straight.
Yeah.
So there isn't that left going left.
Yeah.
It's left with maybe a slight tail, which basically ends up in a similar place if you start a bit further right and draw it back in more. So that's definitely one thing, that more synced up move is definitely stabilise the face, no matter pretty much face to target, no matter where the path moves to. So the path dictates the shape rather than the club face doing it.
Yeah.
So irons, I mean, from a head point of view, it's really, I mean, from a structural standpoint, you know, blade's a blade's a blade. I think there are elements where, I mean, actually the Callaways, because they've got that weight in the back, depending on where you want to go with the heads and what your kind of arrangements are with the brands, we can basically make any of them work. You know, the swing weight side of things and the length is no problem at all. And so the Callaways have got that little bit of weight in the back. We can get the weight down a bit from that test club to facilitate the length. But there's only so much you can do with a solid lump of metal.
Yes,
So it becomes a little bit. There are some that have slightly different lines through the neck and the hosel.
Yep.
You know, the Titleist is a particularly clean square line. Mizuno similar. But from a raw performance point of view, actually, even the Callaway, there's a little bit of a drop at the bottom. But there are a lot of very simple, clean head shapes, but purely from a performance point of view. The Strixons are the only ones that take a little bit of spin off. So that we don't want to go down for you. But outside of that, there's no tech in a blade.
No.
So it's
you
very
kind of choose sort of,
rare for me to
what
say,
you like
but
the
it
look
doesn't
of a bit
really
more.
matter which one we use. They can all work. They're all similar base loft. You say that kind of 30-odd degree base loft on the 6 iron, so 1 degree stronger where we are now. It does become incredibly subjective, or depending on whether there's a company that you've got being pro, whether you've got a link with and an arrangement with that, but we can make that work either way.
Yeah,
So.
and I think it's quite nice now. I was looking forward to fitting as well, because I was lucky that TaylorMade looked after me for 5 years or so back in the day. So it was always down to Basingstoke, and it would always be built with TaylorMade clubs and have it all done in front of you, which is fantastic service. And then as I sort of went through PGA route, I had a big contract with Callaway, so James at Callaway helped me out a lot with those. And now I'm kind of in a situation where I'm an independent coach, where I kind of pick and choose what I want a little bit more, have a little bit more freedom to kind of go into what do I like the look of, and potentially even having a mixed bag or whatever performs really.
It depends a bit. With the irons, it's going to depend a bit on feel. So I'll get a couple of the ones just to give you the feel side of it, because slight head shapes, but they'll have different sounds and feedbacks.
Yep.
How long was one you hit today? Yeah, nice again.
Thank you.
Compare with that addition with a head weight.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got a few of the heads. I'll just get a couple with each of these heads just to see, one, just to make sure there is no performance change, but also then you get certain visuals. So we picked up the TaylorMade, the P7MB, Mizuno MP221, Cobra MB. Slightly different lines around the toe. So the TaylorMade's got a little bit of a more squared off toe. Mizuno's slightly higher in the toe line there, and the Cobra's a little more compact shape-wise. And do change. I guess one of the slight changes, you do get marginally different distances from CG to shaft. So one you might just strike a little bit cleaner with another. So I'm going to put the TaylorMade on first.
Remember, I had always grown up playing blades, and kind of the Callaways being that nice sort of smaller, almost look like they're kind of shorter profile as well.
Yeah, they were pushing me a little bit
Reminds
shorter.
me of a set of blades I had back in the day. Do you remember the Cleveland TA1s?
Yeah.
And I had a 2-iron in that. And that thing was tiny. That was a swing it or miss it.
Yeah.
Like you did there's
They
no in between.
were
There's no
such
toe
a
or
pretty
heel in it.
series. Yeah, the TA1s, TA2s. I think they were one of those that was rated. They were rated kind of best iron on the market at one point. And they were such a pretty head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of got those vibes a little bit looking down on the Callaway, where it just almost looks that just a little bit shorter.
Yeah, certainly the Mizuno in particular is that kind of old school, slightly longer length, slightly round the toe.
Yep.
And say Callaway, certainly the Cobra, a little more compact. Not quite as compact as those Ricky Fowler.
Yeah.
gold ones that were really quite small.
Yeah. I played the TaylorMade MB blades when they had the swing weight in the back as well. Was it the hexagonal weight they had in the back? Back
Oh,
2013,
they were.
something like that, I think it was.
Yeah, they were.
So I had a set of those that I played.
There was an R11 series with a badge in the back. There was the CB.
There was a CB to it, and they had the MB.
There's
and the
CB,
MB
MB,
had
and MC.
like
had in
a
the
sort
back,
of
yeah.
a darker grey,
Yeah.
almost like hexagonal kind of shape swing weight in the back, similar to that.
That's the thing. Get golfers reminiscing about old clubs.
Oh yeah. Drivers is always a thing for me. Everyone always says about keeping a fairway wood and keeping an old 5 wood.
Yeah.
I'd get a driver that I'd love, hence I've still got the Epic Flash. But I knew what it would do, and I would keep it for ages.
Yeah.
So I'd love the R9 Super Tri, that was one I loved.
Yeah. Very consistent head.
And
very
then I had the
consistent.
Monster, I had the Slider 430.
Oh, have
So
less spin.
That was,
When I mean that head, because the weight was so deep and far forward,
Yeah.
was as quick as anything you'll find
Yeah.
now, but with no spin, so it
that
just
would-
went.
yeah, that was when
forever.
I was playing a lot of links golf as well. So then it was just
Yeah.
ball flight, very down on the ground, running, and the thing would be very hot. But I say if you had a bunker to carry,
Couldn't afford
and
to
it was
miss
a bit downwind, now you're thinking, okay, well actually, it was almost like an into the wind hole. I'd push it past a lot of people.
Yeah.
Down the wind, I'd get left behind.
Yeah,
Because
it
it
just
would just
fall out,
nosedive
yeah.
on me. Dump that one a bit.
Deep onto that. Yeah, definitely a little bit of a different note to it.
First one I dumped a bit, that was a
think so,
spare
yeah.
swing.
I'll just take that off and just miss the spin. So it's just making sure the silver dot's still on it. I'll take a very, very small fraction off that. It's just a hair heavy in terms of swing weight. There we go. The launch and spin numbers as good as identical.
A bit thin.
From a feel point of view to strike with,
At the moment, I'd say the Callaway head. From a feel, the feel I can't hit with that starting off.
yeah.
Again, looks a pretty similar looking down on it.
You know, maybe versus the Titleist head, maybe it's 150 revs, slightly lower spin. So there'd be very, very small variation on spin based on face patterns,
Yep.
milling. Let me just take this and I'll switch it up. But if the Callaway's beating that one, in very slight differences in sole profile. So one of the things the Titleist has got, I'll show it's coming in a bit, that's got that bit of beveling on the leading edge.
Yeah.
The TaylorMade doesn't. So in terms of getting, so I don't know how visible that front edge there is a little bit angled. If I can catch the light, does that show? That way. No, wrong way. Yeah, so you can see that front edge is a little bit beveled in, whereas the TaylorMade's dead, it's a little bit sharper. So less of an issue being less steep into it, but you know that'll affect a little bit of the turf interaction.
Yep.
So those are kind of minimal things. putting the MP221, the Mizuno blade on. So this one from it's a pretty neutral sole, so it's not quite a sharp leading edge of the TaylorMade. There's a little bit of a slightly softer profile to it, but to the sole, it's very, very slight. And this is just a classic blade shape. Mm. This is just one where with the different heads. So the Mizuno's got a slightly longer hosel, so when we put the sleeves on, get the lengths right.
Yep.
Just grind a little bit off it, so that's why we're putting a little bit of extra weight onto this head. Check the loft. It's a hair weaker loft. I don't want to sort of damage the bond on this.
Yeah.
So it's just
That's
a
fine.
half a degree weaker loft, so it'll be slightly higher, but in terms of interesting from a feel point of view.
Definitely looks longer looking down on it.
Yeah, it's that line around the kind of the upper part of the toe. So if we're looking at that part there, it can come out a little bit more, slightly higher on the toe on the Mizuno head. So looks a little bit longer, or is a little bit longer heel to toe. So where that loft's a hair weaker, the flight's a hair higher, but that's proportionally very similar to the Titleist head from a flight point of view. Yeah, I mean, 18 and a half, 5 and a half, that's, yeah. Yeah, so the only one, the TaylorMade was about 150 revs, couple of hundred revs lower spin. But it marginal, very, very marginal in the grand scheme of things. That one actually got covered onto a little better angle attack wise. Yeah, very neutral. There's nothing. It's a that and the Titleist very similar in terms of the muscle shaping. Yeah. It becomes quite subjective.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's how they're all doing fairly similar things, I think.
Yeah.
Just try a couple with the Callaway head again.
The Cobra head's actually slightly heavier, so
Yeah.
that one we're to manage the head weight. Look, they're better than they have been for weight. So going back to the Apex, they're better than they have been in terms of weight. Cobra over the last few years have been a little heavier than the rest. And this series, they've actually got a couple of lighter heads coming, slightly lighter heads coming in, because the demos were the slightly heavier ones from a tolerance point of view. So actually, I mean, Justin Rose using them to win not long ago. They're ahead.
So you've still got the M1 driver in, isn't it? M1, M2?
M2, the 2016
Yeah, that's
M2. Yeah, so it's and that. You know, that kind of goes to show, really, he's a free agent. He can use what he wants. He's not a player that brands aren't going to want to supply.
No.
And you know, when he might be, in theory, he might be giving up 5 or 6 yards. I doubt it's as much as 10, but could be. But if the trajectory's in a good place, you know, it's.
Well, Richard Bland took a while to get out of that head as well, didn't he? He was another one that sort of.
Yeah, there've been a good number who've stayed in that one. It was a great head. So this one's just back to that little bit long.
Must be a Hampshire TaylorMade thing, I think. For the,
yes. It's just very slightly heavier on swing weight.
Yeah.
Very slightly, but yeah.
So definitely like the looking down on that one a bit more.
Flight numbers. It's interesting. There's a marginally different sound.
Yeah.
I think with that weight port at the back, there's a little bit of a, for want of a better phrase, a little bit more of a click.
Yep.
A little bit, but.
I like the sort of shorter profile of it as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so the slightly heavier swing weight's the one that's just
a bit.
You can see you just get a little right, so a little under on that last one. but it's still, it's the shot shape.
Yeah, I mean
that
that
you
one.
want
If
it
I
to
just
be.
thin
So,
it a bit like that, it's still behaving itself because the shaft's
good
there. It's
bad
not,
one. Yeah.
it's not running away. Right, one more.
That was ripped.
Yeah.
So just turn the face in. Path got a little more into out. So just turn the spin down a little bit more
Yeah.
on that one.
But that's kind of, for me, that's kind of sort of little soft curve that I want to see.
Yeah, it's not, in terms of move wise, it's 8-9 yards. That's less than 2 bays width, which over a 205 yard shot's nothing.
No.
So
And
so I
it's,
think
it's seeing that direction, it's moving that way.
Yeah. I think it's with something like this, there's not a necessity. If you were looking to get a little bit more back at the top end of the set, you could go to something like the TCB in a forehand if you wanted a bit more back. But actually, with the way your ball striking and things, it's not necessarily something you're not going looking for it.
No.
That's just as much technically it's a slightly deeper CG, but that's just, some players like the concept of that. It's not a drastic shift. And again, actually what we don't want to do is we don't want that spin to start coming down. So actually the blade retains a little bit of spin for you. So I think if you like the shape of the headset a little bit more as well.
I like definitely definitely looking down on it. Definitely like it.
Yeah, and there's no downside performance wise at all.
No.
So,
No,
yeah.
and like I said, the shaft definitely feels easier to move. It feels like it's in a better place. You can feel it more active in the right way.
Yeah.
If you like, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it definitely is a little bit more, because the grip end's not rigid, you're going to sense, you're going to get a little bit of load, you're going to feel a little bit of load out the shaft, it's not going to feel like a plank, but the bottom end's very stable, so when you're in impact, that tip end really stays with you, so it's not going to feel loose through the ball, you just get a little bit of
And
loading
from a face
under
perspective,
the
that's going to kind
hands.
of help me out a little bit.
I think that's more the weight. I think so there's that little physical movement really in either of these two shafts. It's more the fact that you're able to get that handle out in front and then control the face through impact rather than the shaft kicking differently. Very, very slightly different bend profiles, things. You might get again 100 or 200 revs difference on spin, but it's not going to be a difference between one being that way, one being that way.
Yeah.
It's allowing you to cover the ball and get the face back to square a little more consistently.
No, all good with me.
From a wedge point of view, you've always been very definite in the setup in wedges. I mean,
I used to have a very light wedge, and I
Yeah.
found it really hard when I went to the Callaways, which are much heavier in the head, because I used to have the tailor-made wedge where you could take the faces in and out.
yes, yeah,
So
the
I had the
TP.
sort of, so I had the same wedge for 10 years and just kept. I'd go down to
Wasn't their
tailor-made.
best commercial decision that
No,
one?
no, it's great for me because I'd just go down to Basingstoke and grab a few faces out, and that ran out after a while. But yeah, I mean that was one where God knows what the grind ended up on that after 10 years. It was kind of been worn down.
Would have only been worn down a little bit.
Yeah.
Just.
But it's definitely an old
smoothed over.
favourite, and I think again that came in. I think when we measured it last time, it was kind of down at sort of maybe under D2. I think it was
Yeah.
1.5 D2. Then all of a sudden, I was finding I was really struggling to flight my. I think they were the ones before these MD. What are these? So they would have been the chrome ones.
Would have been MD.
Would have been 3s or 4s.
The
The ones before them, anyway. And they
MD4s before those, yeah.
they were down at sort of D6, D6 and a half.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I was doing was just dumping the club and popping up in the air, and I couldn't hit that kind of flighted
Yeah.
wedge. So definitely looking like, say, something in that line, a similar sort of trait to this, really.
Yeah, and it's whether it'll be interesting to see going to. I'll pull out that one. They've got some nice. I mean, actually, the Callaways have got some nice grinds this year. Actually.
Yeah, and we ground the back of those off a little bit as well, because I quite like the grind being quite almost sort of half moon, quite consistent, if you like, with most of the bounce being in the centre.
Yeah.
Because when I chip and I pitch, I tend to play most of my stuff front foot.
Yes.
So I tend to sort of like to have the shaft leaning back. I like to kind of release the loft underneath. So having all the bounce proud at the very back.
Yeah. Literally
Just
bounces,
nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Just to show you those sort of those grinds.
They're ones that
just
we
to
ground
back
out.
at what Todd was saying there, 'cause it's a very, very consistent camber to the sole without a prominent high spot. High spot is in the centre, but it's a very gradual progression through across. So I'll give you that one there. And I think this is going to be actually an interesting one in terms of where that, so that kind of weight, whether it's going, because these are in the 130s as well. These are
Yeah,
the same
these are the
shafts
same
as the
shaft, yeah.
arms. So it's whether a similar kind of principle of dropping a bit of weight out the shaft and giving a bit more toe weight, weight in the bottom end, or actually because of the way you play them, just dropping a little bit of dead weight and keeping that balance a little bit more even. Whether that works out.
Yeah, and the only thing I probably look to from playing wise is just trying to keep a similar-ish kind of shape to certainly the 54, but just having a smidge more bounce on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just for more focus, I tend to again play these. A lot of my chip shots, even when I play them high, I tend to play them forward and square faced rather than open them up too much. The only one that I'd really open up is that kind of SOS emergency 60 when that comes in with that kind of like. And I know even if I get to kind of soft lies, I always know that 60, if I'm pitching it, may have a tendency to dig a little bit more because of the nature of it. But it's got me out of jail so many times because of that ground off back edge. So you've got to weigh it up.
So
and
have
try and
that
save
bit more than
shots.
54.
And a lot of the time with these, I tend to play. I always have my 54 as kind of my stock, and I use it for the majority of my short game pitching shots. And then I feel like I've got a higher and a lower option in the 49 and the 59, so I can jump around from there. What sort of
just a kind of couple
shot
of
or yardage
fairly
you're going for?
comfortable kind of 3/4 pitching, so not like a full swing,
So
but
like,
just
let's
going
say
into
like
sort of a kind of a longer short game swing, if that makes sense. So kind of a 3/4
like
pitching
let's say
shot.
like an 85, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. So there's still that you can still start a little bit of a just after, or the club gets the ball just after when you want it to. Yeah.
I can feel the weight of it a lot
A
more.
little bit of extra work
After
getting it to the ball. Yeah. Yeah, because actually they would have probably felt, relative to your current irons, those would have felt easier previously because of the shorter length.
Yeah. I certainly felt that first one I just hit. I felt the weight of even on a little chip shot like that or pitch shot. I felt the extra weight pulling the club down.
Yeah, you can always see you having to, rather than just kind of again, turn on to and collect, almost having just to kind of kick a little bit to get it through. Okay, I'll get something that little bit lighter. So I'm going to move down to, so Todd's got the 125 KVS Tours. I'm actually going to keep the weight position the same, just drop it down 5 or so grams lighter into the high rev in the 125. So still take the weight up a little bit off the iron shafts. And then just going to pick ahead to control swing weight. So let's go. Just going to see where this sits from a swing rating. I just picked up a Mizuno. The Vokies tend to get a little heavier. Just going to see where that comes out for balance. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So this one's one of the T22s, just as a start point to look at the balance of the club first. Some of the heads where we've got the adapter on just come out a little bit heavier. I've already done that. So this one, lengthwise, sort of more in line with where your 60 is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll just make sure it's not a weird loft and line.
Yeah.
Okay. So this has got just a hair more bounce on than your current one, but they say initially more about the timing than looking particularly at the head side of it.
Yeah, I can feel the difference in the weight on that one.
So it's kind of 6-7 grams lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so immediately.
Straight away, it feels like I can get the club head to the ball where I want it to, rather than. I struggle. I almost like when it was lighter. Like my old wedge is probably one of the things I quite liked about it as well was that because it was almost light. Like I say, I feel like I can. The club's almost an extension of my hand, and I can kind of find the golf ball easier.
Yeah.
Certainly with the heavier ones, it's just a little bit more cumbersome.
Yeah, watching the first swing with the other wedge, you could see, so you got to impact and the club came through afterwards, whereas first swing of that looked like everything just arrived at the same time at impact. I'll take it just a fraction less. Let's just push it a little bit less. I'll actually put the matching shaft to the irons in there.
Okay, yeah.
See whether that just drops it a little bit light. So I'm going to go the Modus 120. Yeah. So it's going to swing weight slightly heavier than the last one, so I've taken that little extra weight off. But it's whether we need that little bit extra weight in the shaft versus the iron shafts, or whether actually the same weight works well. I think a slightly different pattern through. Not bad though. Okay, yeah, so slightly, half a degree, slightly lower launch with that versus the last shaft.
Okay. It felt pretty similar, probably just the weight of it being different.
Just take it back to a kind of more, almost a real kind of little feely shot. Just so...
like a little sort of 50.
If you're playing, so that kind of lower spinny kind of 50, 60 yard, just a little half shot. Okay, I'm going to pop the other shaft in for that. That looked pretty under control. I don't want to give you more than one, just so it's just seeing how you don't sort of change your patterns and just play a shot. Because so often, traditionally, you'd go a bit heavier in your wedges just because the weight. This is back to the high road. The weight kind of, you can use the weight to drop it in, but if you're not pulling on the handle, if it's more just turn and collect. Then actually there isn't necessarily the need for the heavier weight. So my problems have always sort of shoved handle forward, so actually the weight helps me drop it in a little bit.
And I think for me, especially when it comes to pitching and maybe playing a bit links golf or the way I play it, I found one of my strengths with pitching has always, and chipping to a degree, has always been controlling low point and low point depth. And it's something that I find with the slightly lighter setup from before, I find it much easier to kind of control where the base of that swing is. When it's a bit heavier, like I say, it just always wants to get pulled down a bit more.
It'll be interesting going back that little heavier for that short one again. Doesn't look as clean.
Felt heavier.
Yeah, interesting. It kind of, it's online. Actually, the delivery, the numbers look great. Interesting that looked like there's a little bit more going on with it.
I tend to play my wedges a little bit more,
if
you like, cutty-feely.
Okay.
Growing up, Jamie Spencer's a good sort of mentor to us growing up and stuff. And Spencer's always been very much finishing in through here, and hate to see the left-hand side of the golf course. Everything was always cut in. So down the practice ground at Neville, we had a short practice ground with probably about a 35-foot tree, about 30 yards short of a green, and then a really tight little green. So it was always kind of hit these spinny little flat cut wedges into this sort of back right pin. So it's kind of sort of stuck in me a little bit. If I sort of stand there and see a shot, I'd always kind of have quite like my Spencer finish a little bit, and it kind of just stuck in.
Bubba Watson.
So I'd kind of sort of you'd always call it like push the heel in a little bit, and you'd kind of just work the club under that way.
Drag it across. Yeah.
But it's a great one for getting at tight pins.
Yeah. Okay, I'll put that other one back. I'm just going to swap it back over. That previous one was pretty impressive.
A lot of years practicing that. So I used to do a lot. We used to like draw it and fade it into pins quite a lot. So I used to sort of grow up. And Neville's a course that's very tree lined. So something I've always sort of grown up being able to do quite well is kind of shape the ball a lot. Always be like behind a tree and trying to play some funky one around a corner or something.
I can do it long game. I just, wedges and things, I've never been great at them.
Yeah.
I'm very much a case of just
Used to try and get it
simplify
where we
down
try and
yeah.
practicing while I try and almost like see a V shape on the green. So I if I had a back left pin, I'd try and play like a low flat draw,
Right.
land it middle of the green to the landing safe, then it would kick forward left and
Yeah.
spin back left. So you could move it 10 yards on the green, but you were pitching it middle of the green, working it towards a pin, rather than going tight at it, if you like.
I love the idea of doing that. Yeah. If it happens, it's inadvertent for me. That's the. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that depends how. Be interesting to know what it feels like to swing.
That definitely feels lighter.
It's whether
the other.
that feels good lighter, as in more controlled lighter,
Try and play.
or too light in terms of just losing a little bit of the.
So with this, that's a softer flex that would be in my irons. So
it'd
we
be-
look for
we'd
this
look-
one.
We'd look the same flex. It's just seeing if
Yeah.
we drop it
Okay.
down in line,
See
where
what it would
does
be.
that go from that timing point of view?
See what it would be for like a 100 shot.
Just wonder whether that then. No, path face to path pretty much match.
Clean.
So what yardage was that for?
I was thinking 100, but I didn't quite strike that.
Well, you got it 100.2, so.
Oh, did I? Oh, not too far off then.
Okay.
That's just more me playing around with shapes and stuff than anything
Let me
else.
just do that back. It's a kind of tight call between these two. I can see merits to both of them.
Yep. Neither of them feel offensive at all. They both feel like something I could play.
Mm. It's whether one just looks a little bit cleaner or not. I think this swing will be interesting with this back to the slightly heavier, slightly heavier of the two, just to see on that one whether. I think this swing might be the one that whether it knits together a little bit better or not. I think because of the way you play your short shots, I think that your hands will make either one work well.
Yeah.
I think it's as we go into a little bit more of a positive swing, does the slightly lighter weight kind of lose you a little bit of that natural.
So with this one, what yardage am I going for with this?
That same, we go for that 100
Okay.
yarder again. Slightly more right. Okay.
Definitely feels heavier.
Mm.
Not necessarily bad heavy.
I think I'd keep it in the other one.
Hmm?
I think I'd keep it in the lighter shaft.
The lighter one.
Still going back to those, just looks that.
I think for those fiddly ones, I quite like the lightness because I feel like I can be a little bit finer with it.
I think you just looked. I mean, on that swing, look, there's just a little bit more going down the bottom. With a lighter swing, your body looked really stable and looked like you're just then moving the club wherever you want it to go, and then it becomes, how all that kind of backup of feel and hands and flighting, and it just looks a little bit less going on if we bring the shafts in line with one another and continue those shafts through.
Yeah, definitely.
Just looks just that little bit tidier. It's a marginal call, but interesting when you've got that, you're able to flip between them.
I think so. And
That first one with that again, we're seeing, like we did with the iron, that little bit more start right and hang out there. And then you've corrected it back in line, but it kind of looked like a bit of a salvage, the second one.
Yeah, it definitely felt like there's more weight to have to time, should we say.
Yeah. And it was interesting, I'd gut feel and was watching it was that last one and just seeing that last one, the right and then the left, rather than maybe a straight that hangs right of the line or a slight draw. There's just a little bit of a wider face to path number on those. So marginal call.
Yeah,
I think
well, then it's
the lighter
continuity along the
ties
set as
in.
well, isn't it? If it's the same iron or same shaft as in the irons as well going through. That's kind of what I've done with these. Makes sense to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do just, if you're going lighter in the iron, sometimes you do just need that little bit more in the wedges for, it depends on someone's technique.
Yeah.
And I think where you manipulate the club for the shorter game shots. We do play a lot of different shot types
Yeah.
with them. If you were just
A lot
there
of
and just
stock, yeah.
almost kind of like I just kind of dump the club on the back of the ball and hope, then the heavyweight probably helps that.
And definitely am very, especially when it comes to wedges, very feel based. So like I've done it before this time last year before going out to the States. I did my wedges and said, right, okay, I'm going to go use the clock system. I'm going to do it all, get it all set, do a chart, ready to go. And I did that a month before I went away. We went out to Sawgrass, funny enough, to do the pro-am out there. And that month before I went away was the worst I've ever pitched the ball.
Oh, really?
And I did a bit of testing and kind of said, right, if I try to call a number and hit it and have no technique in it, no thought, just try and hit that number versus a clock-based system, much better just feeling it. So for me, when it comes to short game shots, I'm much more about let my hands and feel take over and trust that rather than, and again, I'll manipulate the shots and the spins a little bit more. So I'm not really a stock swing pitcher.
Well, you can see from where that when you see.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of work it this way
fade
more.
it back in,
I'll turn
you
it
get
over a bit
7
more.
across, 7 open. You can see how you work that in. That's not something you can't. That's something that's been learned.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily teach it. That's someone who's worked out how to make those shots work.
Yeah.
So, and I think that the kind of the soul-shaped side of it. That's just still the same one. I think the soul-shaped side of it is the bit that actually makes the head selection a little bit more interesting, and also kind of not make sure we don't go overly head heavy as well. Some of the things like the Vokies have got pretty head heavy. They're from a natural camber point of view. I'll get.
I quite like the look of. Again, I suppose it's funny whether it's brand allegiance or whatever because I've played Callaway, but the look of the new Callaway wedges where they've almost got that kind of. I don't think it's I don't call it a bull's nose grind, is it? Or the grind at the front?
Yeah, they just bevel that, kill the leading edge.
Bounce, and then it kind of has a softer edge to the back of it.
And that's been, I mean, they're very, very proud of that. It squares off the leading edge a little bit as well. I get a couple of their heads. They've done some lovely grinds, but that front edge grind definitely is good, particularly in our conditions.
Yeah.
230. 230. So based on that, we would want a hybrid balance of just to fill that gap and then that's so I used before hybrid
Yeah, I mean the interesting grinds, so to go to show you what Todd was talking about there, you can see on this one, if I angle it right, that's the front edge grind, is that visible? Yeah. And on this one then they've got the back edge. So all of Callaway's wedges this year have that little bit of a front edge softening edging. So you say
kind
there,
of
that
for me it
then
almost looks at it the way that if I like a lowish bounce if you like, but certainly a softer back edge, it gives me a little bit of forgiveness leading edge as well.
Absolutely.
So for when I'm thinking more about the line of the 60, which is really kind of ground down a lot and can get quite sharp here, just that little bit of help on the front edge could just potentially just stop it digging for when I want to play it for a 50-yard pitch versus the
and it's the same as the TW grind, the Tiger grind on the TaylorMade has exactly that, has that little bit of has a strong bit of bounce on the front edge, then a softer top, and then graduates off on the back edge. And if we were to take that 60, I'll show you that 60, and then it's kind of there. It might be a case of just
already, are they?
very slight softening just to take the edge off there, but you've got, let's say, just a bit more protection leading edge. But the back edge and this back edge, I'll hold this side by side. So Todd's current wedge on this side. Main difference being that's a little bit more protected on that front edge with that grind. Is that visible? It then flattens off a bit and then tapers off. Now the back edge is pretty much identical. It might be a case of just potentially, I might not need to, but it might be a case of just maybe softening those ridges a fraction, but that would certainly be a very natural grind to sort of take over from your current 60, which they do in the 58 and the 60.
It's always a difficult one, I always think, of wedge grinds, because you are the one who wants the best of everything. I want to be able to play this, but I want to be able to have a bit of bounce when I get the softer turf. So I can't give you everything. Which one do you want?
It's difficult here because we get such different conditions. You get firm links in summer, and you get clay in winter, and they're totally different. Whereas in the some of the sort of southern Europe or some of the southern states in the US, they've got that kind of turf that explodes. It's always soft. You always need a bit of bounce. So it's a little, yeah. It is a
And then
little
looking
tougher
at
here.
bounce again, a higher bounce, giving you sort of slightly lower face contact as well for those pitch shots that come in for a little bit more spin, a little bit lower
Yeah.
down in the head.
Yep. Yeah, and you know, if you go in a little bit tighter, it catches a bit higher at the face, goes a slightly higher launch, so it's
Yeah.
launch angle, land angle, getting a bit of the control rather than just raw spin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, certainly I think in terms of the principles of the bounces, I think the interesting one is getting, where you talked about getting a little bit more bounce on your 54, a bit of extra camber. It might well mean getting the bounce, a bit more bounce, a bit further back on the sole. I mean, the only wedge I can think of that gives you more camber, total kind of up and over camber, would be something like the Clevelands.
Yep.
So there's a bit more bounce on the front edge of this Callaway, and we probably need to manipulate that back edge a little bit. You get a little bit more bounce to it.
Yeah. It's almost kind of keeping the same shape, but just having a slightly taller peak.
Yeah, it's
As a film, and that's just kind of
yeah.
general thoughts. It may not be that.
An interesting sound. What's wrong with that ball? Is there a slightly firmer sound?
I had one of those RCTs the other day that decided to give up on me.
Yeah,
They hit some drives and
that
the ball
metal air
speed goes
does make
down
it-
about 25 miles an hour. You're thinking, oh, I hope that's not the head.
They've and generally sort of good grip and spin on these heads as well. Yeah, so. Yeah, you get, and that's the thing with, you can see the way you manoeuvre the club around, you get a lot of path and a lot of face
Yeah, I'll push it
manipulation
around
to
a bit.
play lots of different shots. I mean, that's 10, 11 from the inside, 7 closed, but so you're still getting 9,000 revs of spin.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. If I was really going to a tight pin, I may exaggerate it and push it to kind of that one. So that would be kind of the idea, starting it right, landing it, and then get it to kind of spin more
And then
left
it'll
as it lands.
Spin left heavily when it lands, yeah.
But there's enough. The good thing is with them is there's enough spin on it to actually have the spin left.
Yeah, so for a shot that's got 10 degrees of face angle, it's still 8,500 revs. So
And then it's go the
not
other
something
way.
I'd recommend many people trying though. Interesting, it's cut up quite a bit. It would be just interesting to see
That was me just moving that around rather than the cut there.
comparison point. It's just doing a couple of those shots with that granted this is 58 versus
Okay,
6,
yeah.
just to see where that spin sits. I'm just going to see the
So same thing,
comparison.
just moving them both ways a bit.
Yeah, just see where the spin goes on there. Actually, the face on these still aren't too bad. But yeah, quite interesting. It's actually those, because you actually got a little bit. I'm going to just make that the same loft, but you've got a little bit less spin with that Callaway, which I've not seen. That one spun a little
Those
bit.
ones there, because of the turf's quite soft, the strike point was quite high. They both they almost got the fresh bits that I don't normally get.
Well, there's actually a little bit more spin on that than this. So if we're trying to maintain the spin, it did seem to be a little bit lower with this head.
Still preferring the C6, I think. Yeah.
Let's just see, giving that back, let's just see where that spin goes with it.
Let's play a straight one. Let's go straight. Oh no, to the right.
Slight drift. It's been interesting because generally speaking, we've seen quite a bit of spin with these. Oh no, it's similar around. Okay, it was It's just more a case of there was one earlier one where it didn't spin quite as much. That
Yep.
actually helped the launch stay a little lower than your current one. Yeah, that's the same spin. That's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just making sure it didn't drop off because
Yeah.
there was one earlier on where it was a little bit less. Yeah, and I think certainly, as I say, grind-wise, on the highest loft, that's just maybe a slight softening on that one to get it basically to your current one. You've still got the width of sole with that one, which
Yeah.
is nice. I think the one that might be a tough one to get much more bounce on, and that camber is that 54. So,
Yep.
as you can see, there's a little bit more on that second half. Now you can just blend that a bit.
But to be honest, I think
If
if it's
still
fractional,
get a
I kind of almost
fractional.
need. I feel like because I play the 54 much more square faced, I play it much more pitching.
Yeah.
The extra little bit of bounce there, if there is a bit more in that back edge, will help me. It's
Okay,
more the
yeah, yeah,
60
so
that I
more
kind of
getting-
really
yeah.
want.
Yeah,
Ground
I
off
think
at the back.
that's then something that you could start off with that. Effectively, as is, it's giving that little bit more
Yeah.
there. Can always tighten it up a little. We can always take it
Yeah.
off.
But then it still falls away at the back by the
Yeah,
looks of that, so it's
it,
still
it
fine.
may well be that bit of a rib sits there. It may be just blending that so the heel doesn't sit high. So just on that corner, just drop that a fraction when that sits down a little bit more, just make sure that blends in.
Yep.
But
But that could be something that I could
that's
play around with it for a
easily
bit and see if it becomes a
retrospectively done.
problem.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I think if
Yeah.
you wanted to continue the Callaways through,
I think, yeah, if I go
they're
like
good.
irons
B,
and-
that grind, the Z grind,
Yeah.
in particular on the 60, allows us to get to where you want it to be
Yeah.
on that without having to do silly amounts of grinding and manipulation.
Yeah.
48, and the 48 is going to be exactly the same as your current one. So I think the
Yeah.
shaft being the same makes it simple. It's just then
Yep.
a case of just making sure that the lofts, just checking the lofts and the distances and make sure they tie up.
Yeah. So I
and
think I have it as 45, 49, 54, 59.
Yeah.
I think as they play at the moment.
Yeah. So wedge wise, really pretty simple. I think because of the way you play them, it makes those grinds need to be that way, which makes it a little bit easier. So generally speaking, biggest differential really on shafts more than anything. Obviously, heads are a clean blade. Wedges have really quite definite needs from a grind point of view. It's just getting that shaft weight down. What kind of different wedges? It just helps you stay centered and control the club a little bit more, and just fine tune that strike point a little bit, not having to just fetch and dump it. Irons, it allows you to get that out in front and really kind of develop your speed through the ball rather than stalling out at and then that bit of a catapult.
Yeah.
So, result-wise, very much fine-tunes, but actually I think in terms of what it lets you do from a swing progression
going
point
forwards,
of view, it
yeah.
opens up the door to where you want the swinger to go rather than just holding it back in.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely felt much easier to move the club with that other shaft. Kind of the shaft felt like I kind of wanted mine to feel, if you like.
Yeah.
And you could tell the difference straight away going to and from, where what I was having to do with my old setup and the extra weight there versus what I feel like the new setup would help me progress towards.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, so good change moving forwards.
Yeah.
And so thanks for tuning to this bit. We're going to sort of round off the iron bit here. We'll do a separate session with the driver, so I hope you kind of want to tune and have a look at that. But thanks for joining us for that.
No, it's been great. Thanks ever so much for your
And,
time. Like, it's always great sort of learning and like I say, I do honestly think it's a big thing with clubs now versus rather than just getting a club and trying to make it work. It's a huge part of it because like I say, I found even for myself, I'm normally quite adaptable to manipulating shots and flights, but the club does start to hold you back at some point.
Well, there you go. Heard it from the horses
That's
now. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to the next bit, and we'll see you guys soon.
Great stuff.